Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers lost the series finale to the Nationals 1-0, still winning the series but missing a chance to sweep. We're going to talk about another great starting pitching performance, the need for days off among the position players, and the Dodgers' uncharacteristic terrible game with runners on base. So, let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and that way you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time watching or listening, my name is Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio, but it's just me today. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you. We've also both spent time in the locker room and the press box covering the Dodgers, so we're not quite insiders, which is probably a good thing, but we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. All the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. All right, let's talk Dodgers. Ugly game. Not ugly. I don't know what the word is. Ugly implies like giving up a bunch of runs. Dodgers lost 1-0. It's frustrating because they had a chance to sweep the Nationals and they couldn't even put one run on the board. Extra frustrating because they had a lot of traffic. We're going to talk in the third segment. We're going to talk about the Dodgers going 1 for 19 with runners on base. That is not going to get the job done. But for all the frustration, one really good thing is another great starting pitching performance. Julio went 6 innings, allowed just 1 run. He was kind of cruising until I think he had faced the minimum through 4 innings. Eventually, he did give up that 1 run in the 6th. He got out of that inning, got a little help from maybe some bad base running by the Nats. But overall, really good performance by Julio, good performance by the bullpen. And normally, when you only allow 1 run, you expect to win the game, especially the Dodgers. They had scored 19 runs in the first 2 games of the series and then put up a goose egg on Wednesday. Frustrating, but, if we're just focusing on the starting pitching, basically ever since that debacle series against the Phillies in LA, the Dodgers starting pitching has been really, really good. In this series, the Dodgers starters allowed 3 earned runs in 20 innings. That's a 1.35 ERA. The Nats aren't good, but they're a big league team, and they're the team that was on the schedule, and they have one of the best hitters in baseball, and all that, and they still just allowed 3 earned runs in 20 innings. In the 10 games since that first Phillies series, Dodger starters have a 2.60 ERA, and that includes, Mitch White's semi-clunker of a bullpen game start and Ryan Pepio's second spot start. So if you take out those 2 games, the ERA in the last 10 games or 8 games is 184 from the guys who are actually in the starting rotation. They've been really, really good. And that's a good sign. We were all worried after and during that Phillies series, like, oh no, is our pitching getting exposed? There's still questions. Walker Buehler's fastball, that's still a question mark. We're not sure what it's going to be. Walker Buehler's too good to stay down for long, so I think he's going to be okay. Julio, he gets a loss in this game with 1 run in 6 innings. If that doesn't tell you that wins and losses are meaningless, I don't know what does. I thought it was funny. I listened to some of this game on the radio, and when you listen on Sirius XM, they only have the home feed in the car. So I was listening to the Nationals broadcast, and they were talking about, basically, they kept referring to Julio as a 20-game winner, which in their mind is synonymous with workhorse, ace, all those things. And yeah, Julio won 20 games last year. Julio got great run support last year. Julio was a good pitcher last year. He was, if you count Max Scherzer and his couple months with the team, Julio was like the 3rd or 4th best starter on the Dodgers. Yeah, he won 20 games. He was very, very good. But he wasn't that. It's meaningless. 20 wins is meaningless, and it's a great accomplishment for him. I'm excited for him. But nobody in baseball is making decisions based on this guy won 20 games last year. Every once in a while on social media, I'll see, especially during the offseason when people put out their lists of the top starting pitchers in baseball. People said, how can you not put Julio on the list? He won 20 games last year, the only 20-game winner in baseball. It's because wins are meaningless for a pitcher stat. Obviously, wins are the most important stat for a team, and you want to go out there and win as many games as possible. But for a zillion different reasons, pitcher wins are meaningless. It is hard to win 20 games if you're not a good pitcher. Like, bad pitchers almost never win 20 games. But the most wins doesn't necessarily mean the best pitcher. And a lot of times it hardly ever does. And so back when starting pitchers went the whole game, it made a little more sense to count pitcher wins. But even then, it's so dependent on, you look at yesterday's game. Walker Buehler allowed 3 runs in 6 innings and got the win. Julio allowed 1 run in 6 innings and got the loss. Perfect example. It's all about what your teammates do. And so for me, people say, well, you got to know how to pitch to the score. Julio pitched to the score pretty darn good and still got a loss. So it's a silly stat, and it's why we don't put much stock in it. But that said, Julio is a very good pitcher, and you can tell the Dodgers are still trying to limit his workload. It would have been interesting to see. He didn't allow his first hit till the 4th or till the 5th inning, I think. So it would have been interesting to see if he had taken a no-hitter a little bit deeper, or even if his pitch count had stayed a little bit lower. If he had gotten through 6 shutout innings with a lower pitch count, I assume they would have brought him back out for the 7th and maybe even beyond. But that 6th inning, his pitch count got up. He did give up the 1 run, and so it made sense. He almost didn't make it through the 6th inning. Dave Roberts came out to talk to him and left him in, and he got through that inning. But, a really good start from Julio, and I think the point I started to make earlier is we were all worried about the Dodgers pitching during that Phillies series, and they've shown, some of the games were against the D-backs and the Nationals, who aren't very good, but there was also 3 games against those same Phillies, and the pitching bounced back. So I think that first series with the Phillies was a blip, and hopefully what we're seeing from the starting pitching now is what we're going to see more of going forward. Dodgers have the best starting pitching in baseball this year, and we've seen that the last 10 games. So even with a loss in Wednesday's game, one big takeaway is great. Another great starting pitching performance. Let's keep that up. So I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about the fact that Mookie Betts had the day off. In fact, all 3 starters had the day off, and so we had, for the first time all year, all 3 bench players starting a game. So we're going to talk about that concept, why that matters, all of that. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. I've told you a lot about rockauto.com. If you haven't heard, I'll give you a quick summary that this is very, very typical of the rockauto.com experience. I needed a new door handle for my Ford Fusion because the interior door handle on the driver's side had broken. I went online to rockauto.com. I bought the replacement part for $8.16 and had it shipped to me, watched a YouTube video. My 15-year-old son and I went out, took off the door panel, replaced the door handle in 10 minutes and $8.16. I looked online, and if I had gone to AutoZone to buy that part, $49.99. Boom. That's all you need to know. If you ever need auto parts, don't pay more. Go to rockauto.com. They're going to have what you need, and it's going to cost less. That, unless you have money to burn, and I don't think you do. If you do, my Venmo is at Snidog. But beyond that, just go to rockauto.com when you need auto parts. It's the best choice you will ever make. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they will know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. Hey, I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. For your next listen, when you're done with this, check out the Locked On Now podcast. There's recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, including me, taking fans through the season like no other network. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. All right, as I mentioned, going to the break, Three Dodgers starters had the day off. Mookie Betts, it was a scheduled day off. Cody Bellinger was still under the weather, and Will Smith, as the catcher, he gets more days off than most of the starters. It was Austin Barnes' turn to catch, and so for the first time all year, we had Edwin Rios, Hanser Alberto, and Austin Barnes all in the starting lineup together, and it didn't go well. I don't think it was necessarily their fault, but, not having Mookie at the top of the lineup definitely affected them. This is only Mookie's third day off all season. And all three times he's had the full day off. He didn't pinch hit. Dave Roberts sometimes calls that a spa day. I don't know if this was officially a spa day where they told Mookie beforehand, you're not getting into this game no matter what. Don't even put on your cleats. Just relax. Don't even stretch in the outfield. Total day off. I would assume that's what it was. Because, everybody needs that sometimes. And it's a hard thing. Baseball season, it's a long season. And you see people sometimes talking about, how can you say games in April and May don't matter because the Dodgers lost the division by one game last year. And in that way, it's true. Every game matters. Every game is worth the same amount, with the caveat I've mentioned before. When you're actually playing against the team that's chasing you or you're chasing them, games count double because every game you win, they also lose. But other than that, every win matters. And so this is not a case of Dave Roberts saying, today's game doesn't matter, so we're going to punt it. They're all major league players. And, the Dodgers came within one run of winning. They came within a few feet of winning. Will Smith pinch hit in the ninth inning with 2 outs, and he hit a ball to the wall in right field that if it had gone 3 or 4 feet farther, it would have been a go-ahead double instead of a game-ending flyout. I think it had a 720 expected batting average. He hit the ball hard. He hit it well, just, not quite hard and well enough. So even on a day like this, the Dodgers still almost won. But, the concept of every game matters, while it's true, one of the frustrations I have with that argument is that you can't prove the alternative. A, you can't prove that the Dodgers would have won if Mookie had been in the lineup today. And B, we will never know. There's no way of knowing how an occasional rest for Mookie will help him throughout the season. There very well could be a game in July that the Dodgers win because Mookie had semi-regular days off leading up to that. And that's the thing, we'll never know that. What we know is that Dave Roberts is thinking about a 7-month season, not a 6-month season. He is thinking about playing till the end of October. And for that, we see it in pitching when sometimes he pulls a guy on a low pitch count, just thinking, today's a good day. Let's get the bullpen some work and save some of those bullets for October. We see it especially with Julio sometimes because last year he so far exceeded his career high in innings pitched already. And so they're being a little bit extra cautious with him. But even with the position players, other than Freddie Freeman and Trey Turner, who both apparently play every day, they're going to get guys days off. And even Freeman and Turner are probably going to get a day off once in a while. Neither of them has yet, but I think they will, and Freddie Freeman, he's probably got some consecutive game streak going because that dude never takes a day off. But, maybe they'll get him in as a pinch hitter and tell him, we'll keep your streak going, but why don't you get a day off? And the day off doesn't have to come when somebody's struggling. I see people say, well, why are they benching Mookie when Muncy is struggling so bad and Mookie's hot? But, Muncy being on the bench wouldn't necessarily help him. We don't know what Max Muncy needs, but probably he needs to keep hitting major league pitching. That's how he's going to remember how to hit major league pitching, is to keep doing that. Mookie, he's not going to get cold from one day off. He's Mookie Betts. He's a very good hitter. And I do think overall this will end up being a positive thing, having him have this day off. It was bad timing that it happened to come when Bellinger was sick. They pushed it back one day because Bellinger was sick, but they didn't want to push it back another day. And so, when you're flying to Arizona, a lot of different reasons that Wednesday made sense to give Mookie the day off if they wanted to give him a day off sometime in this stretch. And so, like I said, it's not why they lost the game. We're going to talk. It wasn't just the 3 bench players who were in the lineup who struggled with runners on base. It was the whole team. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment about that performance. And the Dodgers very easily could have won. And it's almost like, oh, if you can steal a win in that situation, and that's another thing. You're playing against a bad team. You've got decent bench players. If you could steal a win while giving Mookie a spa day, it's like a win-win. Sweet, we won and we didn't have to use Mookie. So it's, there's a balance. And you don't want to give guys too many days off. And maybe in years past, there might have been sometimes when maybe they went a little bit too far and guys did get cold or weren't able to get in a groove. I don't know. There was always a lot of talk in previous years about lineup stability and everything, and the Dodgers not having it. I'm not sold that that's super important, but it has been kind of nice this year knowing lineup's going to be the same most games. And, that's still the case. Mookie probably won't get another day off for a few more weeks. The Dodgers have played 43 games now, and he's had 3 days off. And so that puts him on pace for about 8 days off this season, which is great. 154 games from Mookie. You'll take it. And that's just enough rest. Keep him fresh for the postseason. You also have Mookie coming off his health issues last year that we haven't seen any sign of any of that last year, but I'm sure it's at least in the back of their head that, oh, well, he was hurt last year. Let's keep him fresh. And all in all, you've got major leaguers on the bench and you expect them to come in and give you good at bats. And, Hanser Alberto did have a double in this game. Edwin Rios had a base hit. It's not like they were terrible. It happens. And I wouldn't want it to happen very often. I love the stability. I love when you have the stars should play most of the time, but once in a while, I'm okay with it. And I hope you are too. I'm going to come back in a minute and I am going to talk about the Dodgers going 1 for 19 with runners on base. And I'm going to get kind of nerdy with some stats, digging into, what that means, how typical that is for the Dodgers. And, we're not going to get into super advanced stats, but hopefully some stuff that either you don't know or that you won't mind having a little bit of a refresher, because we're going to talk a little bit about some pretty cool stats that makes it easy to answer some questions about how good is this team in certain situations. So I'm going to do that when I get back. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, spring is in the air and it's a time of renewal and growth, personally and professionally. As your small business grows, LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, I am back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. It means the world to us. I wanted to talk about the Dodgers' performance on Wednesday with runners on base. I'm pretty sure they were 1 for 19. I remember seeing, I watched the end of the game on my phone at my son's baseball practice, but I think I saw when Gavin Lux came up in the 9th inning that the Dodgers were 0 for 16 with runners on base. At that point, he got a base hit, but then Bellinger and Smith both got out with runners on base. So I think that put them at 1 for 19 overall. That is really bad. And so I thought, how does that stack up? And because you will often see people say, oh, Dodgers, runners on base, oh, typical Dodgers. Or runners in scoring position, and they couldn't get them in, typical Dodgers. Or bases loaded, nobody out, got them right where they want them, typical Dodgers. And so I wanted to share with you some stats that kind of tell you can actually see for yourself, oh, how do they do in these situations? And if you go to Baseball Reference, go to the 2022 Dodgers page, and then under the batting, across the little menu, you've got batting, and go there, and then it brings a pop-down menu, and click on batting splits. And split means a certain chunk, a split of at-bats. And so you can see, how do they do? One of them is they have a bases occupied section. So you can see, how did they do with men on base? And this is where it gets interesting. All these stats are before Wednesday's game because, as I mentioned yesterday, these stat sites update daily, and so we don't have Wednesday's game. So these things will go down a little bit because they were terrible with runners on base, but it's a small sample. Overall, before today, they had 730 plate appearances with runners on base. So now they're up to 750. But so you can see one game is still a tiny little chunk of that. But if you look, they're over on the right-hand column, there are two stats, TOPS plus and SOPS plus. Two of my favorite stats especially when you're looking at a splits page, because what those numbers mean is how did the Dodgers do in that split compared to, and in TOPS plus, you're comparing it to themselves overall. SOPS plus, you're comparing it to the rest of the league. So if you look at with men on base, they had, coming into Wednesday, a 286 batting average, 380 on base percentage, 468 slugging percentage. That's an 848 OPS. And if you slide over to the very far right under SOPS plus, that's a 134 SOPS plus. And that means the Dodgers with runners on base are 34% better than league average with runners on base. So it compares the Dodgers to everybody else in the league in that same split. So with runners on base. The next column to the left is TOPS plus, and the Dodgers TOPS plus with runners on is 125, which means that they are 25% better with runners on base than they are overall. Now, the flip side of that is right above it. With nobody on base, their TOPS plus is 80, which means they're 20% worse with bases empty than they are overall. That mathematically has to be. If they are 25% better with men on, then they have to be worse with nobody on. It's just math. But if you look at the SOPS column, even with nobody on base, their SOPS plus is 105, which means they are 5% better than league average with nobody on base, to go along with their 34% better than league average with men on base. And if you look at this SOPS plus column, like there is a lot of numbers above 100 and some that are really, really high. One of the things that always made me laugh is when people would say, oh, bases loaded, nobody out. Dodgers are terrible. They're not going to get anybody in. This year, if you scroll down to bases loaded, nobody out, the Dodgers have 13 plate appearances in that situation. They are 7 for 12 with a sacrifice fly in those situations. That's a 583 batting average, 539 on base percentage, a 917 slugging percentage. That's a 1455 OPS. That's a SOPS plus of 220. That means the Dodgers are 120% better, more than twice as good as league average with bases loaded and nobody out. Now, it's 13 plate appearances. It's a tiny sample size. Obviously, if they got more at bats, some of those numbers would come down a little bit. But basically, what I'm saying is the idea that the Dodgers are terrible with bases loaded and nobody out is not grounded in reality. They do have 2 double plays. That we remember the double plays. We remember the 5 times they've gotten out, the 5 failures. But there's been a lot of good. One number where they actually have been bad is bases loaded with 2 outs. That's only 24 plate appearances, but their SOPS plus is actually 60. So they've been worse than the league in that situation. But almost every other stat here in this split under the bases occupied, the Dodgers SOPS plus is over 100. If you go down to the next section, clutch stats. Clutch means when the game's on the line. And Baseball Reference breaks it into a lot of different categories. And you can just look at the SOPS pluses. And the only clutch stat, only category where the Dodgers SOPS plus is under 100, meaning where they're below league average, is when they're already up by 4 or more runs. So when it doesn't matter. That's the only time the Dodgers aren't good. Every other one, with 2 outs and runners in scoring position, SOPS plus of 125, 25% better than league average. Late and close situation, 158 SOPS plus, so 58% better than league average. Tie game, 125. Within 1 run, 138. Behind in games, 128. The only time, even ahead, It's 108. It's only when they're ahead by a lot that their numbers go down. Everything else, they're really good. High leverage situations, SOPS plus 153. That's huge. High leverage. How do they define high leverage? See if it's here. I can't find it right now. But about what WPA and leverage. But basically, it's all about the win expectancy and if it's within a certain place. So, if it's a 1-run game and you've got 2 runners on, that's a high leverage situation, especially if it's late in the game. So Dodgers SOPS plus in those situations is 153. They're 53% better than league average in high leverage situations. Medium leverage, 130. Low leverage, only 101. They're only 1% better than league average when it doesn't matter. But the at-bats that really matter, Dodgers are awesome. And so I encourage that as just kind of a reality check a little bit, because it's human nature to remember the negative things. I joke sometimes that every baseball fan believes that his favorite team has 3 things: the worst manager in baseball, the worst bullpen in baseball, and the worst performance with runners in scoring position. Every baseball fan believes that because you remember the negative things. You remember the strikeout with a runner on third when all you needed was a sac fly. You remember the time the manager made a move you disagreed with. You remember the blown save. You don't remember. People think of Kenley Jansen last year, and they remember the 3 straight blown saves against the Rockies and 2 with the Giants. They don't remember the 17 consecutive saves after that. You remember the failures. There's a reason for that. It's psychology, and some is useful. It's survival. If you in primitive worlds, if you were a hunter-gatherer, you're going to remember the one time that you almost got eaten by a leopard, and be careful of that leopard. Even if the leopard, chances are pretty low of getting eaten by a leopard, but you're going to remember that leopard. We remember these negative things for a reason, but I would encourage you, beg you, to check out these splits pages sometimes when you are feeling like, man, this team is terrible in this situation. You can look and see how good a team is in that situation. And you can say, oh, wow. With the Dodgers, most of the time you're going to look and you're going to say, wow, compared to the league, yeah, they are pretty darn good. And you can look at the same thing with individual players, the ton of stuff there. So I hope I explained that stuff clearly enough. I wasn't too technical. Hope I didn't bog it down or take too much time explaining it. But I just enjoy going to that. And on a day like this, when the Dodgers did go 1 for 19 with runners on base, it helped me feel a little bit better to look and say, you know what? They don't do that very often. They're probably not going to do that tomorrow, and that's good. So anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you all for listening or watching Locked On Dodgers. We appreciate it. We were a podcast first. We appreciate all of you who are listening to us in your car or while you're working or whatever. We also appreciate those of you who are checking us out on YouTube. We double appreciate the people who do both. That's awesome. But we try to make sure that this is a good show for you, however you're consuming it, and we hope we are being successful in that endeavor. So if you're not watching or listening every day, we would love if you add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you have friends or family who love the Dodgers as much as you do, please tell them about the show. Let them know they can find it wherever they get podcasts or on YouTube. All they got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. For today, if you want to know another show to listen to, check out the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I'm on Twitter at Snidog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com. Or our phone number is 323. Man, I can never remember this when I'm doing it on my own. 323-863-LOCK, 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.